Well, hey, everybody. Welcome again to Munro Podcast here. And today I have Mr. Llewellyn. Robert Llewellyn, famous for a lot of things. I did my homework. I'm really impressed. I'm very impressed. So thank you so much for coming on board, Robert. Thank you.
No, it's a great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. No, it's really good to be here.
So we've already discussed this with everyone, amongst ourselves, between the two of us. And so we've decided that we're going to go deep into the technologies associated with electric vehicles.
Yes, really detailed.
Yeah. So if you're into that, you might as well shut off right now and run. No, we're not doing that. I want to have some fun here because everybody kind of knows fully charged and everything. But what they don't know is what I didn't know. And Robert Llewellyn is also Crichton. Now, for those people who never traveled to Britain in the early 2000s, you won't have a clue as to what I'm talking about. But when I was working with BMW on the Mini and stuff, I was watching you and laughing my tail off. I couldn't believe it. You could never guess which way that script was going to go. And it was always best, like, after 4 or 5 pints. So I'd really like to know a little bit more about how did you get that job? And,
right.
Yeah.
It's going back on time. Well, for one thing, I mean, its life in the United States was really peculiar. It was because it was shown on PBS stations. And there was a time, and I think we're talking late 90s, where they kind of showed it as a syndicated series over every single PBS station in the United States for, like, I don't know what, 10 weeks or something. And it got enormous response. But what happened was it caught on in certain cities. So it wasn't universal. So, like, in Los Angeles, no one's heard of it. New York, no one's heard of it. Boston, really popular. Seattle, huge. I mean, Salt Lake City, Red Dwarf is it's enormous. St. Louis, Missouri. I'm just trying to think of the places we went. So Chicago, very, very popular. So it's all the PBS stations in those cities would show it regularly, and we actually we went over there once and we did pledge drives for all these different PBS stations all over the state. So there are people in America who have seen Red Dwarf, but it is a real niche show in the United States. But so it was on there, but it was, and I think it's still occasionally shown on. I think it's KCTS in Seattle. I think that's the one city they still show Red Dwarf every now and then on their channel. But it's very niche in the USA.
Wow, I did not.
But
know
it was basically it was basically in 1988. I wrote a comedy play that was on at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, big theatre and comedy festival in Edinburgh. And the whole idea was that I wanted to write it but not be in it, because I'd been doing stage stuff for years and I wanted to be a sort of tweed-jacketed old playwright who smokes a pipe and types out scripts. You know, that's what that was my dream. And then the guy that I wrote it for originally dropped out pretty late on. He got a proper job. And so I stepped in to do it. Well, then the producer of Red Dwarf saw that play. Thankfully, the play was a great success because I really needed it to be, because I was absolutely penniless at the time. And that was a success. And the producer of Red Dwarf saw that play, said, "Do you want to be a robot?" I think I might have said no to start with, but then thankfully I did say yes in the end. And so I started working on it in 88, 89, around that time. And they'd done 2 series before I joined it. So I am still referred to as the new boy, even though I've now been doing it for
the new boy. Years. That's what you want to hear. When you're old like us, we were discussing that prior. Hearing the new boy.
I'm the oldest. I'm the new boy, but I'm also the oldest member of the cast by a couple of years.
Oh, wow. You can be new and old at the same time. That's excellent.
Yeah.
But you were talking about a proper job. When I did my research, I knew about Red Dwarf, but I didn't know who you were on Red Dwarf. But then I found out that you're a shoemaker as well. Son of a gun. Yeah. So I'm a tool maker. You're a shoemaker. Damn, we've got so much in common. It ain't even
We've got
funny.
a lot in common.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the most bizarre. I can't explain why. It was such a strange set of circumstances. But I had made some kind of like leather belts and pouches and things, which hippies bought in rock festivals. So I made a living out of it, but it was pretty. I didn't really like doing it, but it was sort of. And then I walked past a little shop in London. This is in the 1970s, early 1970s, and I saw this old dude with a shoe on his lap and tools and things. I've never seen anything like it before. And I don't know, I wouldn't do that, but I just walked in and said, "What are you doing?" And he was an extraordinary guy, Frankie, lovely man. And he taught me to make sure. So he worked for a company that I was then hired by, and he taught me with another couple of people. He was a concentration camp survivor. He was a Jewish shoemaker from the Czech Republic, but because he had the tattoo, he had the numbers on his arm.
Wow.
But because he made boots, they didn't kill him, basically. So he was put in a shed and he made boots. I mean, the stories about that stuff are amazing. So he would have been then in his late 60s, I would think, when he taught me. It was such a very simple English. Very basic English. And he once said, I showed him a shoe that one of the first ones I'd stitched myself. And he looked at it and he shook his head and he said something in Czech.
You should
and
be
the other guy
should be an actor.
Well, yeah, exactly. It was sort of like that. But he said, and the other guy laughed. And I said, "What did he say?" He said, "Your stitching looks like a dog pissing in the snow."
Wow.
Which was a beautiful
oh
phrase.
my
I've
God.
never forgotten that. Yeah.
Well, that's brilliant. Well, I made a mistake, and the foreman, things were different in the olden days. People don't believe it, but when we had a mistake, it cost a lot of money if you were a tool maker. So he took me over he took all of us apprentices at the same time over to the a scrap bucket. It's filled with chips and whatnot. And he said, "Bend over." And he booted me in the tail.
Wow.
And I went sailing into, and he was English, I got to tell you that. So anyways, he booted me into the chip bin. Yeah. So that was, that was how they did it there. I'd rather, but I don't know which is crueler, picking a couple of chips out of your hands or living with the fact that somebody says, looks like a dog pissing in the snow.
Like a dog pissing. But I mean, imagine that. Imagine if someone did that to a young apprentice now.
There's no young apprentices. No, the guy.
Well, there aren't any. No, you're right. And we desperately need them. I mean, that's very true. Yeah. But I mean, I think if you kicked someone into a bin of scrap metal, there would probably be
lawsuits at least. Yeah.
There would be some lawsuits. Yeah.
So anyways, I know only a little bit about the arts. I like watching pictures and, going to plays, but I don't know anything else about that. But I want to know is, how did you get started in the EV world? What was the impetus?
Yeah, so that was very much US based. So I did a show for 10 years which in the UK was called Scrap Heap Challenge. In America, it was called Junkyard Wars.
Yeah, Junkyard.
So I presented Junkyard Wars in the States. So for, I think it was 4 years, 4 years, yeah. We made the shows in California. So there was a British production company with a base in California. A lot of Americans, a lot of Canadian camera operators, I've got to tell you. But they were, and so we made it. It was exactly the same format show that we made in the UK, but it was with American it was a engineering game show.
Yeah,
the closest description. And while that was going on, I just met all these people who were either consultant engineers that were working with us or in the teams, and they'd say things like, "Oh, I'm developing electric drivetrains," and it's so hard to wind your brain back to that, but it meant forklift trucks or disability vehicles or stuff you'd see in a factory. It didn't mean car. And I didn't understand what they were talking about, or why they were doing battery management software, which at the time just sounded so dull. And they would be working for companies like AC Propulsion. This is pre-Tesla, there wasn't a Tesla then. This is like 2000, 2002, 3, 4, 5. So that period. So and I don't know who those people were now. I know I met is it an English guy called with Wright who did Wright Speed. So what was his name? He built a very fast, very early electric car. So we actually met him in the UK first of all, and that he was involved in the very early days of Tesla and was such a difficult man. I don't want to slander him, but I'm not surprised he didn't last very long there. He wasn't an easy person to get on with, but clearly very talented. So that kind of, it sort of sparked an interest, but I couldn't really understand it. And then I had a ride when we were filming, the teams made monster trucks.
Yeah.
That was the challenge that week. So one of them I remember did 1 mile to the US gallon. Ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
Had I think a sort of 10-liter truck engine in it, and it was just crazy thing. But while we were filming the test of that, it was in Ventura Raceway, which is just north of Los Angeles, and there was a drag strip next to us, and there were all these, and we could hear it in the distance, and it occasionally interrupted our recording because it would be a muscle car or a Ferrari or a Porsche roaring up the quarter mile. But then realized there was this little yellow thing that they were racing against. And in the lunch break, one of the guys came over and said, "Do you want to have a ride? We love junkyard wars. Do you want to come and have a ride in this car?" And that was the T0, which was a test bed for AC propulsion motors. And this was 2002. And it had Nokia laptop batteries stripped out of literally in their plastic casing, but put in a box really neatly. It wasn't rubbish like we did on Scrappy, but it was beautifully put together. But it was in a wooden box in the back of the car, all wired up. And then there was a desktop PC that was running the software stuff. And they sort of showed me. But I mean, I'm looking at this utterly baffled. Where's the engine? Where's the fuel line? Where's the carburetors? What the hell is that thing? This is like a vacuum cleaner. Didn't make any sense. But that car did a sub 3 second 0 to 60. But I think it had a range of like 8 miles.
Yeah, well, where do you want to go? You want to go fast, or do you want to,
And we're only going a quarter of a mile, so it had enough to get up there and come back and then do it again. So that. And even then, I went, that's weird. Why would you go to all that effort? It felt like a bit of a sort of hobby science project. It didn't feel like a plausible alternative at all. It didn't make me immediately think, oh, electric cars are the future. But it was that combination of that. And then one night I got a lift home with one of the crew very late at night in a Prius. Well, the Prius hadn't arrived in this country then. I think that was 2002. So it was a very unremarkable looking Japanese car covered in dust. We were in the desert, and then they drove me back to Los Angeles. And when we were at some traffic lights on Sunset Boulevard at about 2 a.m, the lights changed and this car just went like that. And it was I hadn't noticed before, but it was the weirdest thing. Made no noise, didn't go, didn't do anything. And I went, how? What's that? It was a woman driving, and she went, "Oh, it's a hybrid." And I can't tell you how that meant nothing. So my dad and my granddad grew hybrid apple trees. So they would have an old tree, they cut it off, and they tie a new bit to it, and it would grow into a different tree. And that's the only time I'd come across hybrid. So I had no idea. So that really did intrigue me. I was fascinated why they bothered. So I then learnt about the EPA, the California Air Resource Board, all the legislation that had gone through in California, and the pollution, which I was aware of. In that I first went to Los Angeles in the early 80s, and I just remember my eyes stinging and my nose hurt because of the millions of massive petrol cars with no catalytic converters, leaded petrol, all that stuff. And then all that legislation came out of California, really. And then you then realize that the development of electric cars came out of the computer industry, really, more than the automotive industry. It didn't come out of Detroit, did it? It came out of Silicon Valley.
Well, actually, it did. I worked on the EV1, and that was we started that project in either 89 or 90, and then we left. We didn't really want to leave, but anyways, we were unceremoniously pitched out by the guy who's in charge of purchasing at the time, because we can do that ourselves. So okay, fine. So we left, and then and then they fired Lloyd Royce, and they fired Bob Stemple, and they killed the EV1 as quickly as they possibly could because it didn't really work with Wall Street. But it was, if General Motors wouldn't have listened to Wall Street, if they'd have kept Bob Stemple and Lloyd Royce, there would have never been a Tesla. World. Never in a million years. No, never.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I mean, that's what I didn't know then, because I'm assuming. So when I would have been in, 6 months around that in Los Angeles in about, say, 2000, I think the last time I was there doing that was 2005. Well, the EV1 was already around then, wasn't it? I would think. Yeah. But I don't remember I didn't hear anything about that until years later when I saw Who Killed the Electric Car, and I went, oh, it all kind of clicked together then. It was sort of very much that, it was such an extraordinary story, how that.
Well, we told them, put our name in and we'll sue the piss out of you, because we were leading that thing, and the lady who wrote that, or actually the writer who talked to the lady who basically said it was her little tell-all story, she was not our favorite person on that product and that project. So we didn't. I wanted nothing to do with our name being in that book. Yeah.
Right. To do because have you seen the movie? Have you seen Who Killed the Electric Car?
No,
film?
I know who killed it, but I was told, who killed it, but really it was Wall Street. Wall Street did not see any. There was no future in electric vehicles. Wall Street knows. And have you ever talked to an analyst, a financial analyst, about electric vehicles? Oh boy, that's an afternoon. Yeah, yeah. Anyways, we have to dive. We had to move away from that. Yeah. But anyways, so when did you first see a vehicle that you said the Prius? So.
Yeah.
How did you get involved when in Britain then?
So then I traded in. I had a Volkswagen, called the R32. So it was a Golf, but with a 3.2 liter V6 engine. It was a proper petrol head gas, gas guzzling thing, and I loved it. I mean, it was a great car. My children hated it because if you sat in the back, they'd really Volkswagen did a brilliant job tuning the exhausts. So it had a beautiful sound. So it was a very, it was the kind of European equivalent of an American V8. It was a European V6, and it had a beautiful low burble, and it popped and banged when you decelerated it or changed gear. Really good. But
you're good at that driver, too. Holy mackerel! Voices as well. Sky's got it all.
As the driver, you were, when you were sitting in the driver or the passenger seat, you got this wonderful sound. In the back, it was a nightmare. The floor was vibrating. Their kids hated it. And they couldn't, because the seats were so big, the driver's seats, they couldn't see anything. They were, it was not a popular car. So then I traded that in. So it was a very extreme experience at a big Toyota showroom in Oxford. I drove there in an R32 and traded that in for a Prius, which had really only just arrived in the UK at that time. And the Toyota salesman, as the engineer drove my R32 away and came in with a Prius, he said, "Are you sure you want to do this?"
Perfect salesman. And I'll bet you he don't have any of those little plaques on his wall.
Because I do remember that when I was standing next to him, the glass in the wall, the glass in the big, the big pane of glass of the showroom vibrated when he started up the R32. You hear, and you could see it go, because it did have a lot of a stupid bloody car. It was ridiculous. But and I do remember I estimated that to drive to this showroom, I was doing under 20 miles to the gallon in a Golf, which are usually really economic cars. So on the way back, I did 72 miles to the gallon in a Prius. And I went, well, that's interesting. So in a way, that was the start of it.
Yeah. Well, we have to put things into perspective. What would the price of a gallon of gas be in those? Actually, forget that because nobody wants to look at history. What's a gallon of gas worth now in Britain?
It's about £8 a gallon.
£8, and a pound is worth about $1.25 or something, or $1.30.
$1.25. So say $11 a gallon.
$11 a gallon. Okay. Around here, right here in Detroit, a gallon of gas is going for around $3.90 to $4, something around there, right? So it's almost 3 times more in Britain to get your car filled up. So
I mean, our gallons are fractionally bigger, aren't they? They're a tiny bit bigger than a US.
Yeah, they
US
are.
gallon,
Yeah, they are. Well, they're
Yeah.
a lot closer to a liter than what like if you have 4 liters of that's pretty close to a gallon in an imperial gallon. So here's the thing from a money standpoint. People say, I don't want to buy an electric car, blah, blah. The 10-year payback, it is a payback. I mean, and it's quite big because gas goes up and down and whatever sideways.
Yeah.
Electricity doesn't. So we were driving the Rivian, and our price to fill up the Rivian was about $11. But my Jeep, I had a Wrangler Rubicon, and to fill that up was like about 53 or $54. And the difference, and we're going the same amount, and I got a better off-road vehicle in the Rivian than I did with the Jeep, and the difference in money is like significant. Now, the initial buy, okay. If I would have bought another a Wrangler at that same level, a Rubicon at that same level, and done all the trick stuff, I'd have been the same price as the Rivian. So to me, this is like a no-brainer. If you're looking at a Rivian versus a Rubicon, and I had Jeeps from the time that I was about 13 or 14 driving those things. I really like. But like you say, it doesn't make any noise, but it has a tremendous amount more power. And that's where people really don't quite get it. Yeah. And now you can go more than 6 miles.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
If you're very careful. No, but the thing that it took me quite a while to understand it, but people would talk about, brand loyalty with a vehicle, and I said, oh, I've never had that. I thought I'm above that sort of thing. Then I realized I think it was 6 Volkswagen Golfs in a row, so I think that counts as brand loyalty. And then I had about 3 Land Rovers, 3 Land Rover Defenders, because I like them, and that's so I did. But what was amazing was, without a hesitating second thought, I went from that to a Prius because of the technology in the car. I'd never owned a Toyota. I wasn't interested in them. I didn't think I didn't know anything about them. Totally ignorant of them. And then the next car was a Nissan, which I didn't even know about Nissan, a Nissan Leaf, because of the technology, not because of the brand. And I think we've seen that happen a lot in the last 10 years, is that, it's the technology that's made people choose things, and obviously Tesla is the best example of that. You're buying a car that didn't exist 10 years ago. The company barely existed. So.
Well, and now they're selling them by the millions. But that's another thing that I was wondering was, when you got into the Leaf, is that when you decided to start doing the YouTube? Or how did that work? No,
it was a bit before that. So I had a Mitsubishi i-MiEV, which is a little Japanese city car, electric, which had been electrified. And because of where I live, I was in this bizarre area that the British government had decided they were going to experiment by giving, I think it was 80 people, an electric car for 1 year, and they would fit a charge point in your garage. So you had to have somewhere off the street to park it. And someone got in touch with me and said, do you want this car for a year? He said it was free, I didn't have to pay for it. So I had it here, and they just put in a 3-pin, like a standard domestic socket.
Oh, 220
in our garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're 240 volts.
240,
here and so a 13 amp 240 volt socket, but it had a meter, so they could judge how much electricity I put in the car and how many far I drove it. So it was kind of, they were collecting data on it. And I had that for a year, and that was because it was, that had a range of 70 miles, I think, if you were careful. It was not a long distance car, and there was nowhere to charge it outside your house unless you plugged. I actually went to see my auntie, and I had an extension cable, and I plugged it in next to her kettle in her kitchen and ran the cable outside and charged it, because I wouldn't have been able to get home. So it was on that level. It was very, very crude in those days. But I really enjoyed driving it, and it was great. And that kind of sparked it off. I thought there's something here, and I also knew that because I'd worked in TV in this country for a long time by then, and I just thought there's no way that a TV company is going to do a show about electric cars, because they don't. And I tried pitching it, they just didn't understand what I was talking about. They just didn't get it. So that's when I started to do the show on YouTube, was really as a kind of experiment to see if it was. I fitted it in with my regular work and other work that I was doing, so it wasn't a. I had that kind of advantage of having a bit of a profile in the UK, so people would start to watch it when it first started, and it gradually grew from that. I mean, the second car I ever drove for fully charged was the Honda Clarity, a hydrogen fuel cell car, which was amazing vehicle. Really, really impressive piece of engineering. I loved it, but I mean, there was no.
Where you get the hydrogen,
nowhere to fill the damn things.
Yeah.
But so that started it out, really.
So how big are you now?
We have a 1,050,000 subscribers, and we do kind of between 2.5 and 4 million views a month, depending on time of year. We definitely get ups and downs.
Yeah.
So it's about that size, and we now do. I've lost count. I think 5 live shows around the world every year. So. We've just done one in Sydney a few weeks ago, and the next week we're doing one in London, really big event in London. So they have really grown from really very modest start when we started doing them in 2018, the first time we did them. So this is like it's not a business to business show. It's definitely a consumer oriented show where you can come and see cars and test drive them. So in Sydney, we did over 5,000 test drives over 3 days.
Whew.
We had, which is amazing, and they just flat out. All the companies brought a lot of cars, and we had to arrange a lot of charging facilities for them. But Australia is going through a real steep adoption curve, because they were sort of held back effectively by their previous government, who didn't want anything to do with. They were positively discouraging the use of electric vehicles, and were not terribly well informed about them. I'm being polite. And that since they've had a general election, it's completely changed. So in the time I first drove a Tesla across Australia in I think 2018, and there were Tesla superchargers, and that was it. There was nothing else. Well, now I went to a gas station in the middle of nowhere in Australia the other day, and there were 14 rapid chargers under a solar canopy.
That's the thing. I mean, Australia. Sunshine is everywhere. I mean, that's that to me, that would be the natural place. Not quite as natural for picking up solar in Great Britain, but hey, your adoption in Britain is astronomical, correct?
It's amazing. I mean, I can tell you actually, because it's been a lousy day here. There's been a bit of sunshine, but I'll just, because I can see how much solar I've had. So I'm getting a bit now, 24 kilowatt hours, and this is a grey, overcast, miserable, grim British day. It's not a sunny day. So on a good sunny day in the summer, I do about 65, 70 kilowatt hours in a day.
Wow.
So 24 at this time of year is actually not bad. There's a bit of brightness coming through the grey every now and then. But 24 kilowatt hours, that's enough to run your house. I won't buy any electricity today.
Yeah. So I was going to check my phone, but we take the phones away from Sandy because and it shows up right in the middle of an interview or whatever. But we have solar as well.
Mine is turned off at the moment. I just turned it on then to have a look at that. But I keep it. Yeah, you have to turn it off. Don't you?
Yeah. So what is the adoption rate now? We've heard tremendously high numbers compared to the U.S. I mean, everybody is way ahead of the U.S. when it comes for adoption rates.
Yeah, and I think the big difference is the range of cars. So obviously Tesla are huge here. There's no question about it. They are everywhere. And the same in Australia. So I have this really good picture now here in Australia. So we just passed 1 million electric vehicles on the road in January this year in the UK. And it's very noticeable. You drive along the road. I mean, and I live in quite a remote rural area. Well, between my house and the nearest shop, which is 7 miles, the other day, because it shows you what a nerd I am, I counted 9 electric vehicles that I saw in that route. And this is not busy roads. These are rural roads with not that much traffic on. So it's really, the uptake is very high. And it's mainly, fairly wealthy middle class people that are buying them. But there's still more Range Rovers. In our village, there's more Range Rovers than electric cars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is British, isn't it?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, are you? I thought you were in London. Are you in Reading or something, or where?
No. I'm in an area called the Cotswolds, so west,
the
about
Cotswolds,
100 miles
I know
west
exactly.
of London. Yeah.
Wow, very
So
nice.
actually, not far from JLR's headquarters. I mean, they're about maybe 30 miles away where JLR's factory is. So so we're in a very small village. We're not in a big. But I mean, I spent a lot of time in London. I was in London yesterday, so I kind of move between the two. But I actually we've lived here for 30 something years. I don't want to think about it.
So anyway, you've got you mentioned the one in Australia, but you got one coming up too, right? In September in Canada. Yeah.
Yes, in Vancouver, which is we had such a great time there last year. So we're looking forward to that very much. And that is, it's been really interesting to do it. I don't know what it is. I think we understand like the Australian market and the Canadian market more than the US market. And I think it's, and the way it's operating. So we felt very at home in Canada, and we felt a bit out of our depth when we did the shows with you in the in Austin and San Diego. Well, I mean, which I would love to do that again, but it just felt, we didn't understand the American market. And the thing we're really seeing in Europe and particularly in Australia is the Chinese cars. My sister-in-law and my niece in Australia both have BYDs, and that was nothing to do with me. Because they bought those during lockdown, so it was nothing to do. It wasn't Uncle Robert told us to get them. They just want, and they love them. I mean, they're obsessed. And my wife, she's still in Australia at the moment looking after her mum, and she's driving around in this BYD Atto 3, and she said, "Why haven't we got one of these? This is much better."
Yeah.
She does. We've got an MG4, which I love, and she doesn't really like it, and she wishes we had a BYD. But I mean, the amount of Chinese cars now on the roads here, it's very noticeable. They're the new. They're all fairly new. It's only been the last sort of 18 months they've been available. And those aren't in the US for very understandable reasons. I mean, I think it's a huge
The understandable reason is, okay, so Tesla does not advertise at all. Neither does Rivian.
No.
I mean, not on any of the major channels. And it's the same for almost all of them. They do, go online, buy your car.
Yeah.
Well, when you take on the advertising world, you're also taking on Wall Street at the same time. So the general premise is, hey, these guys aren't paying their ransom or whatever, so we're going to throw them under the bus. And that's kind of what's going on in the U.S. You get a tremendous amount of unbelievably bad press about, the batteries are going to go bad. Well, who made that up? Well, that would be General Motors in some back room or something. The engines will, an engine is much better than a, wait a minute, one goes this way, and I'm an engine engineer. They go this way, and a lot of parts. There's a shitload of parts, right, that can fail.
Yeah.
And then I got a transmission on top of that. And the other thing, it goes around in a circle. Not much can go wrong. You can't believe, but the tires failed. Why is that? Well, it had something to do with electricity. It's amazing. I'm telling you, I listen to people talk, and I just,
it's extraordinary, isn't it?
I can't believe how goofy things are. But there's no question about it. The Chinese will be getting into the marketplace. There's no question, zero question about that, because there's a Free Trade Act. And so somebody interviewed me. I can't remember, Bloomberg or Fortune or I don't know, somebody, and he said, "Well, how are we going to keep how are we going to keep Chinese vehicles out of the United States?" And I said, well, I don't know, but it isn't going to be through the, the normal OEMs. Maybe Ford's got a chance, but nobody else does. And he said, well, wait a minute. We've got to barricade these. I said, this is going to be the same as when the Japanese started bringing air cars in.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not going to be any way of holding them back. None. And he said, well, what would you do if you were the president? And I said, if I was the president, the only thing I can think of is that you'd have to kill all the free trade acts. So you'd have to kill the Canadian and the Mexican one right now, because that's how they're going to come in. And then after that, what are you going to be, an isolationist nation again or something? This isn't going to work out real well. So at the end of the day, I have no clue what they're thinking, but I know what's going to happen. It's going to be just like Japan. And like General Motors had 60% market share when the Japanese first started coming over, and now they're about 15 on a good day. 15 from 60 to 15 that's a big drop. Yeah,
and it's such a similar pattern as well, isn't it? Because I do remember when Japanese cars first came here, and the joke was, "Oh, it's Japanese, means it's rubbish. It'll fall to bits. It's
Japanese
not well made.
Junk. Yeah.
Junk, Japanese junk." That's what we taught, and exactly the same with the Chinese cars. They all catch fire. They're all rubbish. You see them. I mean, I've recently drove the BYD Seal.
Yeah,
it's like a model. It's a really, really good car, and the thing is, I think, because I remember seeing a load of BYD cars at the Geneva Motor Show, and I think about 2009, and my aesthetic sense regarding cars is pretty basic. I can't really do the lovely descriptions that like Jack does for us on the show. He understands that design, so I can't really do that. But I could tell these cars were pretty rubbish. They looked awful. I could see panel gaps that were not, you would have freaked out. They were not good. But you see those cars now. So now, 15 years later, they're as good as anything made in Europe. They're as good. That is a similar build quality to an Audi or a Mercedes. They're beautifully made. And when you shut the door, the noise, does that. Oh, right, that's nice. And then the seat is really good. It's really, the handling was amazing in that car. I was very impressed. And it's about 10,000, potentially £10,000 cheaper than a Model 3.
Yeah.
Same range, same performance, all that, Interior, I have to say I preferred the interior. It was a little bit more traditional, I suppose, in that sense. It wasn't it's pared down as much as the Tesla. But
well, I'll tell you, I personally, like I worked for the Chinese. I was there from 2014 to 2019, like almost 2020. And what did we do? Well, we taught them how to design cars and basically how to design electric cars. Now, okay, so everybody, oh, you're a traitor. No, I'm not. Nobody wanted to do that in the U.S., and I wanted to go in that direction. So when somebody comes up and starts talking like that, I say, well, yeah, but who taught them how to build cars? It's one thing to design one. Who taught them how to build perfect cars? Oh, that would be BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen, General Motors, on and on and on. Everybody, Toyota, Honda, they all came there. Oh, yeah, we're going to make some money for the next couple of months or the next couple of years. And now, woohoo, I don't. What's the talk on? We've said Volkswagen and General Motors are probably the ones who are going to lose the most in the way of market share. What's the scuttlebutt over in Europe?
I mean, it feels like because I have no idea, but there's certainly a lot of talk here about that Toyota is too late to the game, and then they've also really gone out on a limb and said, electric cars don't work, it's hybrids, and they just launched the new Prius here, which does look really impressive. I've no idea what the fuel efficiency is. It's got a 2-litre engine, which it's got a fairly large petrol motor, but it's got a 13.5 kilowatt hour battery, I think, so it can do sort of 35 miles on electric only, so a plug-in hybrid. I don't know. I mean, I can't help feeling like there was a really critical role for hybrid technology in the noughties. It absolutely was transformative. A lot of people then considered oh, it's quite interesting when you drive off with an electric drive. It's good, you know. They were, you know, they became hugely popular, particularly with taxi firms and Uber and things like that. Well, in London now, all the Ubers are electric. They're not. They used to be all Priuses. If you ordered an Uber, it was a Prius. Now, if you order an Uber, it's a Model Y, or it's a Hyundai Ioniq, or it's the one I went in last night, a Kia e-Niro. I didn't order a special, I want an electric one. I just ordered an Uber, and that's what came. You know,
yeah, that's the same thing in California.
Yeah, and you know, they use them because they're cheaper to run. That's why they use them.
Yeah, they're making more money, and that's and they don't have any maintenance. I mean, I talked to this one guy. He's got something like, I don't know, I can't remember, but it was huge, like over 500,000 miles on this Model Y, or sorry, Model X, and you know, the guy's raving about it, and he's putting his kids through college, and he gave his son the old one, and I said, the old one? Well, how many miles did that have? Oh, well, that one had 450,000, so it'll be good for another few years. Well, he's going to 450,000 miles. Because, I mean, this guy's driving all over the damn place 24 hours a day. He says he's busy.
Yeah.
And you don't get that kind of mileage. And they were all old. I mean, it takes a while to put that kind of mileage on a car.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. I think he said that the one was like a 2018 or something. And I said, well, what have you done? Well, I had to put brake pads on it and tires. They wear out, and I said, well, anything major? Well, I hit something once, and I broke some radiator or something. He had no idea about anything else. He had to change the radiator because he hit something. I mean, at the end of the day, these things, and you don't get that kind of press in the U.S. It's always, range anxiety. I don't know how long are you going to beat on that dead horse? So I have a question. So we were talking about all the different cars that you've looked at, and which one do you like the absolute best? What's your all-time favorite electric vehicle?
I mean, because I drive I've got a Model 3. That's what I drive generally. And I went to test drive the Fiat, the 500e, the Fiat, and it was such a joy because when I went to we just picked up the car. We had it for like 3 hours to film it. You know, we didn't have it for a long time, but I drove there, and on the way there, I stopped at a charger in the town we were in, topped up the Tesla so I could go straight home, and we drove the Fiat to the same charger so we could film how you plug it in and all that stuff. This is a few years ago, and it was so easy in the Fiat to park it. And the Model 3 is not a big car, but it was a classic British car park. It's all really tight. And I just went in this little car, and it zipped in there, and you plugged it in. I mean, the range isn't phenomenal, but it was such fun to drive. It was such a great tight little car. So I remember that very fondly. I mean, I've done far less car reviews the last couple of years because Jack's taken over doing them for us, which is brilliant because he's amazing. But the Seal was one of the ones I've driven recently, and then at the kind of high end, the EQS, the Mercedes, was just. It's the second time I've driven. So I've driven the EQC and the those two. So the big SUV and the kind of sedan. But it was so, you then go, okay, I get it. When you buy a really expensive car and the seats are just amazing and the whole way it's put together is incredible. I appreciated it. And that is an extraordinary vehicle. And I saw two of them yesterday in London when I was walking around London that were like executive limousines. They were picking up people. So there's a lot of that, all those kind of high-end executive chauffeur services in London, 100% electric. They're all electric. So they're BMWs and they're Mercedes.
What about Bentley? We obviously we don't get too many of those around here.
Well,
but
there's
the electric.
they're around, but there's the new electric Rolls Royce, isn't it? I think I haven't seen that.
I thought it was a Bentley.
Yeah, Rolls Royce. I've got an electric Rolls. I can't remember what it's called. So I haven't seen that yet. I really want to test drive that because the first Rolls Royce I ever drove was an electric one, and it was an experimental one. It's when they first tried putting a battery in, and that the engineer, I drove with the engineer in the car, and he said the amazing thing is with this is that the motor and transmission weighed 1.5 tons. The original petrol engine and transmission in a Rolls Royce weighed 1.5 tons, and so when they took all that out and replaced it with an electric motor and a battery, they kept thinking, well, we can have a bigger battery. Come on, it's not heavy enough. You know?
Holy mackerel!
Yeah, it was. I mean, they're massive cars. They're like they're the size of a passenger coach. You know, they're huge things, very heavy. But so I haven't had a go in that one. I mean, I know people they've sold some. You know, so but I haven't seen one in real life. Yeah. But they're all doing. I mean, up the road from us is Jaguar Land Rover, obviously, and Range Rover. You know, their fully electric Range Rover will come out. They've been talking about that for 10 years, but it will be launched this year, the electric Range Rover. So and they've said they're not making any more combustion engines. You know, they've completely moved on. So
on my last trip to Europe, I ended in Britain, and I went up to Crewe to Bentley. And this is in 2019, and we were starting to talk about, hey, we've got to come up with an electrified Bentley, and we talked about a contract, and they knew that I've been, I gave speeches. I mean, got some real eye-opening comments from some of the bigger OEMs. Anyways, I went to Bentley and talked to their in-house people about what was going on and what my predictions were. And they said, we've got to get you down here. Because we used to work with Bentley a lot. And we're working on it. We need to work on an electric vehicle. I don't know where that went, but we didn't get involved. We didn't get anything on that one. So that's why I thought maybe there was something there, but
you'd think, I bet they will have done something. They just haven't revealed it publicly, because we saw a fully electric Aston Martin. That's got to be 8-9 years ago, and I've never heard a thing about it since. So I was making a TV show, not for Fully Charged, for a commercial TV channel here, and they brought one along to the show, the studio we were in. So it was more, the actual show was more about like self-driving cars and vehicle automation and high-end luxury stuff, kind of silly show. But the Aston Martin, I mean, it was a stunning looking car, but it was a one-off. It was a prototype, but it was an electric drive. And I've then thought, oh great, Aston Martin are going to do an electric car. Nothing. I've not heard a peep about them since then. So they may be working on it.
But anyways, the guys at Bentley were really they were really excited about it, and I. Like I said, we tried calling him, and then COVID hit, and then nobody was doing anything. So yeah. So I really hope that Bentley does come out with something, but it's going to be kind of tough. I mean, they're owned by VW, and VW is. I mean, they've made announcements about chopping a third of the company out.
Yeah.
I mean, they used to be the biggest car company on the planet, and they used to be huge in China, but their market share is going away.
I mean, that must have been, because I remember going around the Volvo factory in Sweden, and you could they explained to us that the majority of this is 10 plus years ago, the majority of the vehicles they were manufacturing then were going to China. Well, that's completely flipped around the other way.
China owns them. Yeah.
They're making them in China, and the Chinese market is huge, and they're supplying their own. They've got their own companies making that.
Right. So So Geely owns them, and Geely has the best, without a question of a doubt, the most magnificent design studio I've ever seen in my whole life, and all the best guys from Britain and Germany, they all work there. I mean, they all got huge contracts and stuff like that to come up and I don't know, work with them. So let me just diverge a smidge, because the guys gave me a couple of things, and we've kind of just.
Yes, we have.
Okay, so one of the questions that came up here was, besides EVs, what other renewable energy applications were you passionate about, or are you passionate about?
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, it's the really big thing here in the UK is offshore wind because of the nature of the country. You know, we're surrounded by
Yeah.
this extraordinary amount of quite shallow sea, which is, you know, quite unusual. I mean, so it's ideal for offshore wind, and of course it's a Danish company that does most of the big wind turbines, but they are building them in this country. So there's now very high employment to a building, but they're really huge offshore wind turbines. So the latest ones are now 14 megawatts. You know, when you see a wind turbine on land, I've seen, you know, like in a Californian wind farm, those are probably 1 or 2 megawatts. And so the big ones out at sea now are 15 megawatts, and the most recent version is a 20 megawatt single, you know, one turbine. And that is so what that then they kind of calculate one turn of those blades runs 5 houses for 24 hours.
Holy
one
doodle.
rotation. And we've now got thousands of those. So we're regularly over 50% of all our electricity is from offshore wind. And that's you know, across the year, it's about 50%. And on specific days when it is windy and you know, which happened recently, there was a windy and sunny day late last year. The solar was really high. We were, I think, about 72% renewables in the UK on a working weekday, not on a weekend or at night. It was in the daytime, which is unbelievable. That change has been really phenomenal. Yeah. And that technology, and what's been interesting with that is it's the offshore oil and gas industry, the people who worked in offshore oil and gas, which we had big time in the North Sea, are now all working for that. Because, you know, if there's one thing, an engineer who can put up a big, you know, oil rig that doesn't fall over, they're quite good at putting up a big wind turbine that doesn't fall over, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
So and they've adapted some of the support vessels that, you know, maintained and moved the oil rigs around. They're huge ships. I mean, it's on a scale that is just breathtaking if you haven't seen it up close. And those are now all used to install wind turbines. So the Dogger Bank extension, which is the bit of sea between us and the Netherlands and Denmark, is this massive wind farm now. It's just, and you can't see it. You only see it if you fly over the North Sea. You know, you can't see it from the coasts. It's too far out at sea. So it's kind of invisible, but I think the general public still aren't aware quite of the impact of that. And what they're working towards is that we generate about 110 to 120% of our electricity from that. So more than we can use, but then we have to, that's where all the storage technologies and the, you know, because I don't think lithium ion is going to be able to store, you know, 100 petawatts, which is kind of what, you know, so it will be hydrogen or it'll be ammonium or it'll be some other form of electricity storage. There's all kinds of those technologies that come and go, and it's so hard to know which ones will work, you know.
Well, they all work. It's just which one's the most effective and efficient,
economically
and
viable.
economic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that is very exciting. And I think the other thing is that we're just starting to see now is vehicle to grid or vehicle to house, vehicle to load. A lot more of the cars that are coming out are capable of doing that. And that's, you know, what you can tell that I think that will, there's a marketing opportunity there. When you explain that to people, that you can run your house off your car, everyone goes, oh, I want that. Well, like the F-150, I thought that TV commercial for the F-150 Lightning, where they show it in all the classic things with a pickup truck, it's towing, it's driving off road, it's doing all that. And then you see the guy plug it in his house, there's a power cut, and he goes on his app and he turns the lights on.
Yeah.
That, I spoke to a couple of people from Ford, and they said that flipped so many people over to thinking, I want this.
Telling you what, we have one here. And we've had 2 situations where the power went off, and in one of them was an inconvenience, but the other one, we had people flying in for workshops, design workshops, from all over the world. Wow. And you know what? The power's off, and we didn't know what the heck we were going to do, and we plugged in the lightning, and the next thing you know, so we had. This was a 5-day workshop with all these people showing up. They had to move because all the hotels around here, they didn't have any power. It was like tornadoes or something. I'm not really sure. But anyways, at night, we take the lightning off and charge it up, and the daytime we come back, plug it in, and run the factory. And we have a fairly big factory, so this would be like 5,000 square meters. It's big, and everything worked. It was phenomenal. And the same thing. Well, now we are tearing apart the Cybertruck, and I have one. That's the same deal. We can reverse charge and run the house for 4 or 5 days. But we also have solar like you do, and we also have a Tesla wall in the basement. But now how many people in Britain are going in that direction, putting up their own solar system?
Oh, it's quite common. I mean, it's not the same as Australia by any means, but it's a lot more than, it's been a big thing in the last few years. A lot of people have put solar on. There's quite a lot of people with batteries, so that is certainly happening here. I mean, I would still say it's under 10% of houses. It's not like super common. It's not like it's over a third of houses in Australia. It's really, really common there. It's just very normal to have that. And there are some building companies now, finally, that are building new houses that have solar integrated, that do ground source heating, they don't use gas in any way. So the heating and cooking, everything is electric. So and they're now finally. It's just because I've been arguing about this for years, but they are now releasing their figures, the costs of doing it. And 10 years ago, it would definitely have cost a lot more to build a house like that. Now it's like 2% more. It's a really 2%, small percentage
really?
more. Yeah, it's kind of nothing. It does, because all the building regulations now have increased. So the insulation's got to be like this, and so when you build a new house, it has to be up to a certain standard. So to push it that little extra bit is less of a big step. And so that is still an ongoing. Still, the most of our new houses are not like that, but the ones that are amazing. And when you see a kind of fully integrated solar roof, it makes so much sense. That's the time to do it. We've all lived in a world where you retrofit, where you've got an old house and you try and put batteries and solar on it. But when you do it from scratch, you've got ground source heating.
Yeah.
It is so. When you see the long-term results of that, there's a big building development in Wales, South Wales, not that far from here. And the cost of running those houses is under £10 a month, so like $12, $15 a month for everything. Yeah. All the lights, all the heating, everything, all throughout the whole year. I mean, it's so cheap once you've built them. So that for homes for poorer people who haven't got a lot of extra cash, that's it makes so much bloody sense.
That's what we're doing. I mean, my wife and I put the solar in. We have an older house, and put the solar and put the batteries in and whatnot. And we get charged an $11 fee because we still are hooked up to the grid. They will not pay us for what we send back.
Yeah.
So basically, if we didn't have the $11 fee, we wouldn't pay anything. It would just be 100% zero cost. So I don't know. I personally, you guys also have, I know that they were trying to shut down the coal and all that other stuff, but you guys also in Britain put up a couple of nuclear power plants as well, right?
Yeah.
So it would seem to me
in the process, yeah.
Yeah. So it would seem to me that with the nuclear power and the wind power and solar power, you should be able to be totally independent in record time. I mean, I'd much rather see nuclear than coal, or even gas.
Anytime.
So
yeah, I mean, I think the amount of coal that's burnt to generate electricity in this country it's so close to zero you can't really measure it. It's basically finished. I think the last coal burning plant has closed. It doesn't operate anymore. So we do have peaker gas plants, and we have nuclear, and but it's the majority now is there's no question. The majority of the generating is from wind, and I think I think within probably 5 years we won't use any coal or gas at all. So that's going to make a bit of a difference in because my argument has always been, when we burn gas, we're sending money out of our economy to other economies to pay for it.
Right.
Same with oil, and if we produce it here and we employ people here to make it here, doesn't that make more economic sense? And I mean, that argument kind of crosses all the political boundaries, which is the way it should be.
But which one it bothers? It's the guys advertising, marketing, Wall Street, or in your case, the FTSE. But so anyways, we should wrap it up. We had a good time.
Yeah.
And that's what I was really hoping
time.
for. When we were in Vancouver the last year, we had a great time. I like it when we can talk about stuff that isn't, sad and, it's the end of the world. I don't really want to talk about that too much. But anyways, I'd really like to thank you, Robert. This was phenomenal fun. I'm really happy.
Thank you. No, it's been a joy.
Yeah, it was. It was great. And for those of you who stuck around to listen to old guys talking, thank you so much. Stay tuned to Munro's blog, whatever it's called here. and for those of you who are interested, the YouTube channel will be showing the teardown soon of the Cybertruck. So, anyways, Robert, again, thank you so much. This was tons of fun. Thank you.